Welcome to The Favorites, the podcast presented by Bet365. We are part of the Action Network. Today is maybe my top 5 favorite episode of the year. Definitely my favorite episode of the year in which football is not discussed, with one of our favorite annual guests. I got no time to waste. I'm going to say hello to my co-host, my companion, my compadre, professional bettor, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad.
Brother, you know how much I love the Oscars. I know you are heavily invested in the Oscars. This might be the only podcast all year that my lovely, lovely wife is going to listen to. Our guest today is such a superstar on this podcast. We get requests for him to come back. I can't wait to introduce him. But first, as a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF. In Iowa, terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Heads up, by the way, the great state of North Carolina is launching sports betting this week, Monday, March 11th. If you're in the Tar Heel state, take advantage of the best sign-up offers across every sports book. A link to all those offers is in this episode description. If you're in North Carolina, check out the link in the episode description. All right. I teased it. Sunday night is the 96th presentation of the Academy Awards. As we do every year at this time, we welcome onto our show a true Hollywood insider, a top manager at Mosaic in Los Angeles, a man named one of the 40 most powerful people in comedy by the Hollywood Reporter. Most importantly, a true Oscars savant, friend of the podcast, Mr. Michael Lasker. What is going on, brother?
That's as always an incredibly kind introduction, and I love that you're naming a list I was on from like 7 years ago.
Doesn't matter.
There aren't any new lists for me to be on.
Once you're on a list, you hang it on the wall. It's in your obituary. You put it on your tombstone. You highlight it in Wikipedia, whatever it takes.
Look, you guys know how much I love this podcast, and I always love, I obviously met you years ago through Isabel Gomez.
Izzy Gomez. By the way, nice drop. I was trying to figure out how are we going to drop Izzy's
We had to drop it fast. We don't drop it fast, it doesn't get dropped. Right. No, I love coming on here, and to be very honest, and I'm Simon, I'm looking at you. The only thing about this podcast that I feel bad about when you guys have me back on is I feel bad that the Oscar betting odds, arena is not quite as malleable as some of the sports you guys bet on, and we'll get to all those reasons why. But you know what I mean? It's like when you guys are betting on the Super Bowl, even though you guys obviously are experts and have a sense of how things might go, anything can happen, but with this, it's like, first of all, they've already tabulated the votes. But also because of all the precursor awards in Hollywood, there are definitely always trends. And this year, which we talked about briefly before you guys started recording, this is one of the, this year's harkening back to, yesteryear, when you had these dominant films like Schindler's List and Dance with the Wolves and Amadeus and Out of Africa, where there's going to be a movie. I mean, obviously we'll get to it, but Oppenheimer is going to do very well on Sunday. So it takes some of the teeth out of the betting lines, I assume, but you guys will explain that.
Well, yes and no. I don't get the Oppenheimer love. I've now watched it twice. I've spent 7 hours of my life watching that movie, trying to figure out why it's getting all.
Well, it's only a 3-hour-long movie, Chad. So what were you doing that other hour?
The second time I was streaming it and I had to pause. So,
sure. Okay.
So I'm counting the hour that I had to step away as part of the time that I spent watching it. Listen, I know Simon has a lot of thoughts on this, and Simon, who is always playing sort of the smart psychological angle. We are going to get into it, but first I want to, we touted Lasker as being able to list the winner and nominee for every major Oscar category going back decades. So,
Oh boy.
is this is this still true, Michael?
It can be. It depends on the category.
All right, let's
Depends on the
start right
category.
now.
Depends on the year.
I'm going
If
to
you hit
start
me in
right
the
now.
90s, I could just go all day.
Best actor category for the film year 2001, 2002 Academy Awards. Best actor nominees were.
Okay, for 2001. And one thing I want to be clear to your listeners is that when you say like who won the Oscar in 2001, it's always for the release year of the movie, whereas that Academy Awards aired in 2002. So,
Correct.
okay, in
So this is
2001,
release year
correct.
2001,
Okay, in
calendar
2001,
year 2002.
correct. So in 2001, Denzel Washington won Best Actor for Training Day. The other nominees were, and this was his second Oscar. He'd won his first Oscar in 1989 for Glory for Best Supporting Actor, which was his second Oscar nomination. He was nominated for Cry Freedom in 87 for Best Supporting Actor. He's also nominated in 92 for Malcolm X, and he's been nominated since Training Day. And he was up against Tom Wilkinson for In the Bedroom, and he was up against Sean Penn for I Am Sam, and he was up against Will Smith for Ali. And the fifth nominee in 2001, so we had, sorry, Sean Penn, Will Smith, Denzel Washington, Tom Wilkinson, and the fifth nominee. Oh, I know this. It's
You
like on
got
the
the
tip of
hard
my.
ones.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's of course Russell Crowe for Beautiful Mind, and Russell Crowe had been nominated for 3 Oscars in a row. He was nominated in 99 for The Insider, and then he wins the next year for Gladiator, and then he's nominated again for Beautiful Mind. And Beautiful Mind wins Best Picture that year. Ron Howard finally wins his Oscar. Jennifer Connelly wins Supporting Actress. Beautiful Mind, and supporting actor was Jim Broadbent for a movie called Iris. Adapted screenplay was Beautiful Mind for Akiva Goldsman. Original screenplay was Gosford Park for Julian Fellows. So I don't, we you
Listen,
have to get up earlier in the morning than this.
now you're just showing off.
I'm sorry. I'm
Uh,
sorry.
and that's totally fine. I loved the movie Gosford. Was it Gosford Park? That's what it
Gosford
was, right?
Park, yeah.
Yep.
Gosford
I
Park,
loved
yeah.
it so much that I spent a year researching books that I might be able to write about that era of London.
Wow.
So I could just go and spend a year in London researching, like, people who wore tuxedos and had upstairs, downstairs lives.
I love that. I love no, it's a great movie. I mean, Robert Altman directed it. It was kind of his swan song because he died. He was nominated. People kind of thought he might win, but Ron Howard was sort of due, and Altman actually never won an Oscar. And he died a couple of years later. He might have even died like the next year. But that was his last kind of considered great movie. That's a great movie, and of course that movie, Julian Fellows wrote it, and then that's why you have Downton Abbey,
Yeah,
because then later
exactly.
that's why he does that show.
Yeah, which is why I ended up not doing the book because he stole Downton Abbey, and so there
Sounds like
was
you
no
should. Are you going to sue Julian Fellows?
probably. I'm probably going to
Okay.
have to sue him. All right, Simon, we're going to talk about Oppenheimer's dominance, and Michael just alluded to that. Look, it's the leading contender for Best Picture, Best Director, Actor, Supporting Actor, Cinematography. If you would bet $100 on a 6-leg parlay for those 5 categories plus score, you'd win less than $30 if they all hit. Tell me right now, Simon, as the wise guy, as the professional, as the guy who always finds a way to play opposite and come out ahead, what are you thinking about making plays on for the Oscars?
Yeah, and I'll just start off by the top by saying that this isn't all set in stone. Last year at this point, when we had on, and did this show, I believe Brendan Fraser was minus 130 to win Best Actor for The Whale. And we said on the show it was way too low and that was like a smash spot and that this was all set up that it wasn't even that great of a movie, but he was great in the part. And Hollywood, not that they felt like they owed it to him, but he had done so much. He had been through so much. It kind of felt like the hype was building behind it. So there is sometimes value on the Oscars. The issue is getting money down, Chad. That's the joke here. It's like most books, the max they'll take is $50 to $100 on any of these bets. So for me, why would I want to bet $100 on, Oppenheimer to win Best Picture to win, $2 or $3 or $5? It's not worth it though. What Chad's saying is a lot of what people are going to do, which is they're going to parlay the lights together. And that's scary to me, Chad. That there's always one or two upsets, right? There's always something that happens just because these people feel, you know, once in the room voting, it's like, are they just going to keep voting for the same type of people in the same movie to win 6, 7 Oscars? It's unlikely, Chad. So this
Well,
year,
I think, I mean, Simon, it has been unlikely as of recent. These sort of
yeah,
dominant historical movies have not been around as much. And we've had a lot of movies recently where like a movie won like 2 Oscars and won Best Picture, or 3 Oscars. Like Coda, which won Best Picture, won 3 Oscars, adapted screenplay, picture, and supporting actor. Argo famously in 2012, also only won 3 Oscars, supporting actor, sorry, not supporting actor, excuse me, adapted screenplay, picture, and editing. And so it does happen where it's more spread around. But even last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which our clients made, was not in that historical epic model, and won 7 Oscars. I mean, that movie came very close. It wasn't technically up for Best Actor, but you could argue, because there's only been 3 movies in the history that have swept the big 5, which means you win picture, director, one of the screenplay awards, and then both lead actor and actress. And those 3 movies are It Happened One Night in 1934, The Cuckoo's Nest in 75, and Silence of the Lambs in 91. But like last year, I mean, Everything Everywhere won picture, director, original screenplay, lead actress, supporting actor, and supporting actress. So in a weird way, it's kind of the closest a movie's come to like a modern sweep. But again, it was nominated for Best Actor. The Oppenheimer train cannot be stopped at this point. I mean, looking at that parlay, the only one that I'd say there's still a little bit of like, will it happen, is Cillian Murphy. But what's interesting, and not to bore your listeners, but I think what's also happened, unfortunately, is that post-COVID, a lot of the studios are still hedging their bets on how they release more adult-driven movies. So I loved The Holdovers. And I loved Oppenheimer too, but I loved The Holdovers. And what Focus did was they put it out in a small release in October, started to widen it in November. It was actually doing really well, making really good money on not that many screens. And then boom, they took it out. They took it out of most theaters, and they debuted it on Peacock on like December 29th, which is of course what Universal/Focus, that's their streamer that they own. So they made a decision, we'll make more money going onto VOD, and we want to get Peacock subscribers. But to me, The Holdovers was a classic adult, actually kind of a co-viewing movie, because you could kind of take the family to. You could probably take 10 and up to that movie. It wasn't that dirty. And I think that movie, had it just been platformed at Thanksgiving and gone wide at Christmas, and then it gets all the Oscar nominations that it got in January, those are movies that could play for like 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks, and they quietly make 70, 80 million bucks. Had that happened, Giamatti, he'd just be more in the conversation. And I think he still has a chance, and people love him, and people do feel it's so funny. This whole narrative, which I remember vividly, people are really talking about how he was snubbed for Sideways, because he was the only person in Sideways of kind of the main group that didn't get nominated. I mean, Sandra Oh was nominated, but Virginia Madsen, Thomas Hayden Church, Alexander Payne, and Jim Taylor won the Oscar for adapting it. It was nominated for Best Picture. He got nominated a year later for Cinderella Man, which was a total like makeup nomination because people felt bad he had been snubbed. So he has a shot. But I think the thing about Oppenheimer is that my philosophy on it is that if you're voting for Oppenheimer for these 6, 7, 8, 9 categories, and you're thinking about the totality of the movie, there's no way you can come out of it not thinking that Cillian Murphy held it all together, because he did, And by the way, there's a lot of people who like think this is like the 5th best Emily Blunt performance. People love Emily Blunt, but like she got nominated. It was a really weak category this year, but like no one thinks she's going to win. Now, of course, Downey Jr., and I think you mentioned earlier, Simon, you maybe have a bet on Gosling, which you'll get to, but I mean, Downey Jr. is the lock of the night. I mean, this is more than just a performance. I mean, this is a coronation of, you're the original Nepo baby. We loved you all the way back in 92. We nominated you for the first time for Chaplin for Best Actor, nominated again in 2008 for Tropic Thunder for supporting actor. But I mean, this guy's story coming out of, the guy didn't just go to prison. He went to real prison. You know what I mean? I mean, all these actors, even Danny Masterson, not to get darker, he's already been transferred out of the hardcore prison to a more medium prison. I don't know enough details about where they sent him, but they already said, we sent you somewhere too crazy, right? Downey Jr. went to the crazy prison. And so his rehabilitation, literally and figuratively, it's just been too good. And he was amazing in the movie. And so he's going to win. You know, there's no stopping that. Even though Gosling, I thought was incredible. It was a great category across the board.
So Oppenheimer is interesting. Minus 3,300 to win Best Picture. The next shortest odds, Poor Things, 16-1, then Barbie, 20-1. Oppenheimer, to me, a good biopic in a genre that is often examined. Barbie, completely genre bending. Poor Things, completely genre bending. Both great movies. Michael, I don't know why everyone is so in love with Oppenheimer. Like it's all great, but it's not epic. I'm not walking away from Oppenheimer with the feels. I'm not walking away from Oppenheimer feeling like I saw something I had never seen before. I'm walking away from Oppenheimer feeling like, yeah, it's a good movie about an important piece of history.
Listen, I think that, you know, there's people that agree with that. There's people that were really blown away by it. What's a couple of interesting takeaways about this year in general, and it all does go back to Christopher Nolan. So in 2008, when The Dark Knight was not nominated for Best Picture, but it got a lot of Oscar nominations, and Heath Ledger won the Oscar for supporting actor posthumously because he had already died. That was the year that Tom Sherrick, who's no longer alive, who was either the president of the Academy or one of the main governors, he said every time the Oscars air, like the next week, they do these postmortems about what went right, how was the season, blah, blah, blah. And in that postmortem, at some point that spring, he said, we should go back to 10 nominees, what they used to do in the 30s. That was a reaction to the fact that The Dark Knight, which was this insanely popular billion-dollar grossing transcendent movie, wasn't nominated for Best Picture, right? So this year, in a weird way, is the sort of culmination of those thoughts. Because look at like what we have. You've got Barbie, made $1.5 billion, which I agree, I loved it, and total genre bending, and Greta did an amazing job, as did Margot. You've got Oppenheimer, which made $950 million in America. And you've got stuff like Zone of Interest. I mean, you've got The Holdovers. I mean, you have the only thing you don't have, which they've had at times, you don't really have a kids movie. They nominated Toy Story 3. They've stuff like that in the past. My point, though, is that this is a culmination award for Christopher Nolan. And I think he is deserving. By the way, even if there's a split on Sunday, he's winning director. And I don't think there will be a split. There's been a lot of splits in recent years. I don't think it's going to happen this time. But my point is, from 2008 to now, it's kind of this culmination of like, this guy's the modern Spielberg, the modern Ridley Scott, the modern James Cameron. He transcended movies a million times over. All of his movies are huge crowd pleasers. And he's just due. And that's what happens a lot with the Oscars, is that it's not that it's political per se, but people think about the narrative. And I think Emma Stone was unbelievable important. I loved it. I loved it so much. I think she should win. I think Lily Gladstone probably will win. And you've got these competing narratives. And the narrative of Emma is a little bit of like, she's 34 years old. She's the modern day Meryl Streep. She's been nominated 4 times now for acting. She's already won an Oscar in 2016 for La La Land. She's going to be back. It's a little bit of why I thought, and I think I said on this podcast last year, that Cate Blanchett would not win. It's really hard to win a third acting Oscar. She's not even 50, right? And it went to Michelle Yeoh for Everything Everywhere. Whereas with Lily Gladstone, who I think is amazing in that movie, but she's kind of a supporting part in that movie, even though she hovers around the movie because of what the movie's about. She's in the movie for like an hour when you put it all together. But when you look at Lily, there's like a double whammy of, we're giving it to the first Native American actor who's ever won an Oscar, and the entire movie is about the fact that we have, whitewashed and wiped away. I'm from Tulsa, by the way, that we've wiped away this history. People don't even know about this. I didn't know about it until the David Grann book came out 5 years ago. And my good friend David Holt, who's the mayor of Oklahoma City, who is part Osage, I mean, you basically had to be a member of the Osage Nation to know about this. And now obviously it's getting out there. So I think with Lily, it's like, it's again, it's this double thing of like, she is amazing in the movie. She's certainly worthy, but you're honoring not only the first person Native American woman to do it, and person in general, but you're also honoring the character. You're honoring the movie, the history that has been wiped away. And she's been winning all the awards, you know. So I don't know. That one I'm still like a little undecided on. What are the odds on Best Actress?
Right now, she's minus 162, Emma Stone plus 120. Simon, let's talk about Downey and Gosling for a second. Because to me, I walked out of Barbie and I said to my wife, Ryan Gosling should win an Oscar for that performance. And now I've seen, as I said, Oppenheimer twice. I know Downey is getting crowned, but why did you go so heavy on Gosling, Simon?
Well, again, I didn't go crazy heavy, but it is my bigger position is just because was Robert Downey Jr. born for that role? I don't know, but I can say that Gosling was born to be Ken. Like, it was just incredible how perfect that lined up and how perfect he was as it. Like, it's just, again, Barbie, that movie was not meant for someone like me in any aspect. And they did not make that movie in any way for someone like me that has grown up that way I grown up or lived the way I lived. And I enjoyed it. And I think most people came away like seeing that, like, again, most guys got dragged to that movie with the opposite sex. And I was not going in thinking at all this was going to be an enjoyable experience. And it was so perfectly casted in every way. I just have a hard view of them being snubbed in all these different categories. That's why I did make that bet. And best production design right now, Poor Things is minus 230, but Barbie's plus 160. I like the value on Barbie just because it's hard for me to vision $1.5 billion. You just said they made $1.5 billion. I can't believe the Oscars is going to snub them in a lot of these awards. So,
Well, it's
yes,
really
do I think
interesting
Brian's really going
because,
to win? No, but like you said, Robert
yeah,
Downey Jr., it's the history. It's what he's been through up to this point, including Iron Man, all of it. So I do agree with him. It's probably a dumb bet. I bet it because it felt like Ryan was born for that role as Ken.
I think you're onto something. You know, what's happened the last couple of years, there have been movies getting a lot of nominations that have gotten zero wins, like Banshees of Inisherin last year got 9 nominations, zero wins. And what's interesting is an adapted screenplay, right? So the prohibitive favorite right now is American Fiction, which is a good movie written by this guy, Cord Jefferson. He adapted a book. Um, and this has been a controversy in Hollywood because the Academy has a special screenwriting committee where they have to decide, is Barbie an adapted screenplay or is it original? And, you know, they ultimately decided it was adapted because there's a character. Now, some people say, but there's not really a character. It's just not adapting Homer Simpson. You know what I mean? It's a doll. But I think the Academy decided that because there was iconography, they felt like there was a text of sorts for Greta and Noah Baumbach to play with. So they deemed it adapted. But part of me kind of thinks like, that might be where Barbie gets honored. You know what I mean? Like America's been winning the precursor screenplay, you know, awards and so forth. But this is the one moment. It's the only Oscar. Well, Greta's nominated technically for best, you know, picture because she's a producer on the movie. Barbie's not going to win best picture, but she could win an Oscar if they give her adapted screenplay. So I think you're right. I think Barbie is beloved. You know, the production design thing is tricky because it's like sometimes they think about like, did you bring a world to life that we knew, or did you create your own world? And I think with Barbie, it's like, yeah, they made the Barbie dream house, but the Barbie dream house existed, right? Whereas like with Poor Things, they kind of like invented, not, they didn't invent like old time London, but there's a sense in that movie of like, this all kind of came from our head a little bit. I mean, the production design was incredible. The production design in Oppenheimer was incredible. I mean, it's a tough category. Oppenheimer is gonna clean up. It might win categories people don't even think it is. I mean, sound design is interesting because people think Zone of Interest is gonna win because the sound design was so specific of how they layered in some of the outside sound of what was going on at Auschwitz. But the sound design, you know, guild had their awards on Sunday and they gave it to Oppenheimer. Now, granted, Zone of Interest wasn't, I don't think it was eligible because it was not an American film or something. So it wasn't even in the nominations, but Oppenheimer's going to do very well. 7 at a minimum, maybe like 9.
For one
Well, can you
thing,
answer, Chad, though? Why? Like, I know you kind of went over it, but I know the acting was great, but why is it such a slam dunk? Is it all because of Killian's history of Peaky Blinders and all the movies he's done? Is it just history? Because of, Christopher Nolan, a great director. Is it all just because of their past, not so much this movie itself?
Oh, are you talking to me or talking to Chad? I thought you
yeah,
were
that's for
asking Chad.
you. Yeah.
Oh,
I
sorry.
can't answer that question. I already know
Oh,
the answer.
I
Yeah,
thought
it
that was
feels
for
like
Chad.
yeah, it feels like they're just giving these guys an award, even though
Is that what's
it's not even
happening?
close to the best at anything.
I think that there's a lot of people in the business that just absolutely loved the film and felt like it was, an astonishing achievement, down to everything, the editing, the photography, the original score. I mean, I see your point in that, like, I don't know if it's a movie I'm going to watch 10 more times in my life. You know what I mean? But it's an unbelievably well-made film. And like I was saying earlier, I think just Nolan's time is here. I mean, he's going to win. Like, I mean, I mean, it'll be fascinating to like watch his face on Sunday when they call his name because he knows his name is getting called. I think, look, part of it is just it is all momentum. And frankly, like people expected the movie to be good. What's interesting, and I know this has been talked about a lot, but partially what started the whole thing was how well it did against Barbie that opening weekend. Because people assumed it would do fine. The fact that it essentially held its own and still made like 85 million bucks on a 3 hour, adult film, it just sent this signal of like, we're kind of here to stay. And what's also interesting, I haven't seen the new Dune yet, which I hear is great, but like a lot of people thought because the first Dune won like 7 Oscars and won all these technical awards, a lot of people thought that could really contend for the new one, and people are really raving about Denis Villeneuve's directing. But that got pushed to March because of the strike. So everything kind of lined up for Christopher Nolan here. So I mean, all I can really say is like people in the business love the movie, and there's a totality to it, partially because of all the technical stuff. And sometimes that's what happens. I mean, I remember when I was in college, I was like obsessed with the movie Traffic, which lost picture to Gladiator, which obviously Gladiator's amazing. But Traffic that night wins director for Soderbergh, supporting actor for Del Toro, editing for Stephen Marioni, and adapted screenplay for Stephen Gaghan. These are all like big precursor awards. But Gladiator, I think because it was such a massive spectacle, it was picking up some more technical awards, then it wins Best Picture. So sometimes I think you have all, there's like 19, subcommittees, of the Oscars. You have the editors and the sound designers and the cinematographers. And I think, they're not that big. The biggest branch, obviously the biggest branch is the actors. But the acting is amazing in Oppenheimer. So I think it's a shoo-in at this point. I wish I had a better answer for you beyond that. It's just a movie that people really have. They want to coronate it.
Let me do an ad read here, and then I have a point I want to make. Simon,
Okay.
can you name the fastest growing ticketing app in the United States?
Game time.
That's right. It's Game Time. I love Game Time for two reasons. First, they still sponsor this show. Second, I actually use Game Time all the time. They have amazing last minute deals, including pro and college games. Speaking of which, I'm opening the Game Time app right now from my house here in Connecticut. Look at this. I can get in to see the New York Knickerbockers at Madison Square Garden tonight for less than $100. No matter where you live, download the Game Time app, get out, have some fun. This week, you deserve it. You can redeem code favorites for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, just download the Game Time app and use code favorites for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Traffic, never watched again. Gladiator, watched 18 times. Saving
I
Private
hear
Ryan.
you.
Saving Private Ryan, watched 1,000 times. I think it lost to Shakespeare in Love that year.
Correct.
Never
Yeah.
watched it again. That should be the barometer for how every voter is thinking. Am I going to watch Barbie again and again and again over the course of my life? Yes. Am I going to watch Oppenheimer? No, I'm not. And here's my point about sound editing. Oppenheimer should not be nominated for sound editing because, and I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christopher Nolan is such a purist in a good or a bad way that the way he records the sound, he does not try to make it as clear as possible because he's recording it on site and wants to use that natural sound. One of the reasons I had to watch Oppenheimer again is because I could barely understand the dialogue in the first 45 minutes of the movie. So when they were setting the foundation for the narrative and things that felt important about communism or science or Oppenheimer's womanizing, I didn't understand it because I couldn't understand what anybody was saying. So why would it be nominated for sound? And why should it
Well,
get it for sound?
look, I think that here's the thing. You're absolutely right, and he has gone on the record. What he has said is that he wants his movies to feel like real life. And in real life, sometimes you don't hear everything that you're, hearing in a conversation when you're in the middle of the ocean or whatever. I mean, it's more about how they sort of like did the blast and things like that. Look, it might not win that category. I mean, nothing is going to be, completely perfect. But I hear you. It's funny you talk about Gladiator and Shakespeare in Love. I mean, that's what makes the Oscars interesting is that you're getting this time capsule of what happened that year. And of course, I mean, like there's movies certainly in the last 25 years that have won the Oscar for Best Picture that you'll never think about again versus, movies that you have watched 1,000 times. One of the craziest years, of course, was 94 because you had Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, and Shawshank Redemption, right? So you basically have three modern day classics. Now, Forrest Gump wins Best Picture, but and I love Forrest Gump, I mean, who doesn't love Forrest Gump? But I think that, the Academy they have these whims. This guy, Michael Schulman, wrote a really good book called Oscar Wars. And he talked a lot about the 98 awards when Harvey Weinstein, who's in jail now for the rest of his life, where he should be, waged this massive battle to get Shakespeare in Love the Oscar over Saving Private Ryan. And they just had all these tactics. Like they basically started a whisper campaign that they tried to get people to believe that the movie was only good for 30 minutes. That basically the first sequence on the beaches of Normandy was the best movie ever made, and the rest of it was kind of boring. I mean, they went out of their way to try to sort of poison the wells. And that was a stunner. I remember, I mean, Harrison Ford announced Best Picture that year. Obviously, they don't design who's announcing. Nobody knows who's going to win, but they clearly thought, well, we think Shakespeare in Love is going to win. And Harrison Ford's tight with Steven Spielberg because of, the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies and so forth, Indiana Jones. And, this will be like a nice little coronation. And then it didn't happen. There's a lot of movies like that. I mean, I certainly liked Green Book. I don't know if I'll ever see it again. That won Best Picture in 2018.
Yeah.
No, you've never revisited Green Book.
No.
Look, this is the most subjective art form and the most subjective business ever. And that's kind of what you're speaking to. And by the way, I now, if you said, well, can I take Gladiator or Traffic to a desert island? I would take Gladiator because Gladiator's
Yes.
Gladiator. I mean, it's the pomp and circumstance of it.
We talked about Best Actor for a second. Cillian Murphy minus 1,400, Paul Giamatti plus 900, Bradley Cooper, who we haven't talked about at all, but Maestro has basically not been a conversation for any of these categories, even though it came out with so much sort of pomp and circumstance, and people really believed. Even Carey Mulligan, everyone's like, Carey Mulligan's going to win for Best Actress. She's now 33-1. But the Cillian Murphy story is great. Loved him in Peaky Blinders. Almost wanted him to be the Peaky Blinders guy in this movie. I felt like he was the movie itself, so much of it is in black and white, and I felt like a lot of times it downplayed his magnetism in this movie, which also I think is a credit to him and sort of the way he played it. But Andrew Scott,
oh yeah, your boy.
All of us strangers, how is he not nominated? Because
so this is what happened. I saw the movie. I thought it was great. It's a really beautiful film. He's amazing in it. He's an incredible actor. I first saw him for the very first time pre-Fleabag. He played Moriarty on the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock series for BBC, and he was amazing. And that led to him being in James Bond, and then Fleabag being the priest, and on and on and on. He's an incredible actor. That was this weird thing where that movie was like a festival movie, and all the prognosticators, all the podcasters, all the critics saw it, and they were like, this thing is gonna contend. But it was ultimately a really, really small movie. And it just, for whatever reason, I mean, it just did not gain any traction. And you look at the movies that got nominated for the 10 slots, All of them had traction. This was an incredible year for movies. I could argue there were about 15 movies that could have gotten those 10 slots. And now everybody in Hollywood's worried that this year will be a very bad year for movies because there's less output because of the strikes last year. So it's one of those movies, like, people in the business who saw it thought it was great. People think he's brilliant. People love Paul Mescal, who was nominated for an Oscar last year. But yeah, the only answer is it was too small. It was too small and it was too quiet. And I also think, frankly, a lot of people watched it at home. And that is a movie where, like, you really need to put your phone down. You really need to have the lights out. I'm not suggested it's, seeing Dune and you got to see it with like Dolby surround sound. But that movie is such a tone poem of a film because you don't quite know what's happening, right? And like, is this reality? Is he dreaming? Wait, now he's seeing his parents. Oh, his parents are dead. And I think that's a movie, if you saw it in the theater, a lot of people feel this way about Past Lives, which was nominated for a couple Oscars, but got some snubs. You got to see it in the theater and let it like wash over you. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, whole nother debate. There's obviously no substitute. Seeing a movie at home, I don't care if like you're in pitch black darkness and there's no electricity except your TV. It's just not the same as going to a movie theater. It's just not the same collective. It's always better to do it. And that goes back to Oppenheimer. I mean, Oppenheimer was an event in the same way Barbie was an event, but it's like, I mean, those numbers were insane. I mean, they were still like 2 months in, you couldn't get to like a good IMAX screening. It's funny, Chad, that you talk about not being able to hear the dialogue in Oppenheimer, because I went with a group of people to Grauman's Chinese, which is, on some days considered the best theater in LA because they have all the premieres there. It has all the history. It's an incredible, beautiful theater, but the sound's like a little tinny. And there was a ton of stuff I couldn't understand. And my wife was pregnant. We just had our second kid. And she was just like, I mean, 10 minutes in, she's like, I need to leave. She didn't. She stayed. But she just was like, I'm not, this is not for me today.
But that's the thing. I feel like, dude, I had the same exact conversation with my wife. I'm like, can you hear? She's like, I got no fucking idea what they're saying. Like we were with our 17-year-old. I'm like, do you know what's going on? He goes, shut up. I hear everything. Just stop talking.
I love the movie. I really did. But the minute it ended, I said two things. I have to see it again, and I have to go read the book. And I started the book, and the book is 700 pages, and I got about 10 pages in. But because I wanted to understand more.
I'm not reading that book. You're not reading that book. No one's reading that book. No one read that book when it came out. That's why it took 85 years to make this movie.
What's really weird is that so what happened was Nolan wanted to do a movie about Oppenheimer. Nolan was at the ranch of Chuck Roven, who's a big producer who produced the Batman movies with Christopher Nolan. And he mentioned that he was researching Oppenheimer. And Roven says, oh, I have the option on a book about Oppenheimer that randomly he had gotten from James Woods. So if you go on IMDb right now, James Woods, the actor who's been nominated for 2 Oscars, who's not in Hollywood anymore, who's like considered like a crazed, like right-wing nut, like lunatic. He has a credit on Oppenheimer because he had gotten the rights to that book at some point. And then I guess he gave it to Chuck Roven, and Chuck Roven gave it. So if they win the Oscar on Sunday, the 3 people that will accept the Oscar for Best Picture are Nolan, his wife, Emma Thomas, and Chuck Roven. Chuck Roven was nominated in 2014 for American Hustle. That's his other Oscar nomination.
Here's another trivia question for you.
Okay.
This one's harder, okay?
Yeah.
What Best Picture winner released in the 1980s has the lowest tomato meter score on Rotten Tomatoes? The lowest tomato meter of the movies that won Best Picture in the 1980s.
All right, well, let's think about this. The Best Picture is 1980 in order. In 1980 is Ordinary People, and then Chariots of Fire, and then Gandhi, and then Terms of Endearment, and then Amadeus, and then Out of Africa, and then Platoon, Last Emperor, Rain Man, Driving Miss Daisy. So those are the movies that won from 1980 to 1989. All of those are considered really good movies. And so that has the lowest tomato meter. I mean,
and there's one that has the lowest by a mile.
By a mile.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's do some deductive reasoning. I don't think it's Ordinary People, and I don't think it's Chariots of Fire.
Correct.
And it wouldn't be Gandhi, and it wouldn't be Terms of Endearment, and it wouldn't be Amadeus. It wouldn't be Out of Africa. I mean, it's got to be. I mean, I think it has to be Rain Man. I'm not giving that answer yet, but it has to be Rain Man because that's the most like kind of populist of the movies. Simon is shaking his head. That's the most populist of the movies where I could see like that's not like when something like Out of Africa comes out, everyone just like fawns over it because of what it is. Um, it's either Platoon or Rain Man because maybe I don't know because of the violence, but I can tell that I'm going to get this wrong, and I'm going to go with Rain Man.
You're not only are you wrong, but like actually there are 4 movies that got 89%. That's the highest. Platoon is one of them. And then one movie got 88%. It's Rain Man.
Oh my God. Okay, fair enough.
Simon, what is your thinking? I feel like Simon is going to get this right, and he's going to get it right for the exact right populist reason.
Honestly, I've heard of all of them except the Miss Daisy one. So that's why I was going to go with that one.
Oh, no. Driving Miss Daisy got, that was Morgan Freeman and Jessica Tandy, I believe. Is that correct?
She won Best
Right.
Actress. At the time, she was the oldest person to ever win an Oscar.
That's right. That got 85%. Out of Africa, 63%.
That's so interesting because I mean, I've seen it. It's a good movie. I mean, that was Sidney Pollack's coronation, right? Sidney Pollack had popped up in the 60s, and then he made all these movies with Robert Redford in the 70s, classic films like 3 Days of the Condor. He made Tootsie. He also acted. By the way, I just rewatched The Sopranos. I literally finished it on Saturday night. I just hadn't watched it in a long time. And I forgot Sidney Pollack's in the final season of The Sopranos. When Johnny Sack is in the medical prison dying of lung cancer, Sidney Pollack is an orderly who's there in prison because he killed his wife, and he was a doctor, and he's giving Johnny Sack medical advice. And Sidney Pollack, he's in Eyes Wide Shut. He's the guy who has the party where the prostitute dies. I mean,
Michael
he was an
Clayton.
actor. What'd you say?
Michael Clayton.
He's a Michael Clayton. He was an amazing actor, and he was somebody that all these incredible filmmakers all loved and wanted to put in their movies. Now, famously in Eyes Wide Shut, he replaced Harvey Keitel. Harvey Keitel was in that role, and he walked off the set because he couldn't deal with Kubrick's like shooting style, because Kubrick would do like 100 takes. So then they called him Sidney Pollack, and I'm sure he spent 5 months to shoot 2 scenes.
Right.
But he was brilliant.
All right, let's recap here. Oppenheimer is going to win everything. We certainly think it's going to win Best Picture. We think it's going to win Best Director. We think Downey is going to win Best Supporting Actor.
That's 3 locks.
We think Cillian Murphy is going to win Best Actor. He certainly has he's the favorite by a mile.
Yep.
But there could be some Giamatti sentiment. So maybe there's a bit of a,
well, here, I'll tell you right now, sorry to interrupt you. This is what you have to look for. Okay. One category we didn't discuss. And there's always sort of tips in the night as the awards get rolled out. Best Original Screenplay, which is basically between Anatomy of a Fall, which is an excellent movie, between Anatomy of a Fall and The Holdovers. Anatomy of a Fall kind of has the edge because that's everyone's kind of favorite like indie European film, and she's been winning a lot of stuff. But when Barbie got moved from original screenplay to adapted, people thought that really favored The Holdovers. Now, Divine Joy Randolph, I might be mispronouncing her first name. She's going to win supporting actress for Holdovers. So that's going to happen. And if you see early in the night or when they announce the screenplays, if Dave Hemmingson wins original screenplay for The Holdovers, I would bet you anything Giamatti is going to win Best Actor. If he doesn't, then Cillian's going to win all the way. And again, it doesn't, so your listeners know, it doesn't mean that anything can change. The votes have been tabulated, but what it means is there momentum, and there was a time where I actually thought Holdovers could have challenged Oppenheimer, but that time is come and gone. And by the way, Holdovers was released by Focus, which is owned by Universal. Universal made Oppenheimer. And trust me, the main bosses at Universal do not want anything to get in the way of Oppenheimer's, domination on Sunday.
But the reason why this is valuable info is because if we see the screenwriting win, it's possible we could still get some money down for Best Actor on Giamatti.
Oh, can you bet that late in the podcast?
I don't know.
Or in the podcast?
I don't know, but that's something to think about if the betting is still open. Otherwise, what you're telling us is not helpful information because we need to
know. I mean, I was going to
telecast begins.
I was going to tell you earlier, and this is something that we talked about. So I think that Bill Simmons had brought up on one of his podcasts that Jimmy Kimmel had famously bet on, and he'd gone to Vegas, I guess, and he'd bet Coda in like October of that year to win Best Picture and actually like made money on it. And I think in a weird way, that's the only real, because of all the precursor awards, that's the only real way you could make a lot of money is if you just went to Vegas every October or November. And by the way, we should do it sometime. I'll help you guys do it and just lay a bunch of bets because you have a sense at that point of how things are maybe turning out, but the odds would probably be very different.
The other one, Best Actress. This is where it might be most competitive because Lily Gladstone is only minus 160, Emma Stone plus 120. Anything that I missed? Simon, anything that I missed that we feel there might be an opportunity? Anything you bet that we didn't discuss that we want to get some validation on?
Well, I would just piggyback on what you just said. She's moved actually to minus 210 at a lot of books. So it's looking more and more like she's going to win Best Actress. I'm pretty sure she won the SAG award.
She did.
So like he just said, that feels like great value for a girl that's already beloved by all the actors and actresses of Hollywood. And it seems like she's going to start blowing up now. So that just makes sense. At minus 210 at a couple books, that's good value on her. But we just talked, we didn't really talk about it. Godzilla -1.
For visual effects.
Yeah, it's kind of a good sleeper where you can pair those together and get a nice number. They're minus 150 at a lot of books. This by like really real deep into a film people is beloved. Like they love the visual of it. Everything about that movie they love. So a nice little sleeper movie you can pair with that to get a nice plus number.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's smart.
All right. As a reminder for the second time, catch every episode of The Favorites live on YouTube. For those enjoying on YouTube, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the Action Network YouTube page. The Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 is now live in Indiana and Arizona. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boosts. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Be sure to catch our next episode of The Favorites live on the Action Network YouTube page every Tuesday, 1:45 p.m. Eastern. Download us from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars, say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Until Tuesday, 1:45 p.m. Eastern. Love you.